Welcome to the Folktale Project. This is Dan Scholz. Today we have a very special story from Viking Tales. This is the first story that's really all about Harald. And this story is about how he comes upon his spear. This is Foesfear. Every day, the boy Harald heard some such story of war or of the gods until he could see Thor riding among the storm clouds and throwing his hammer, until he knew that a brave man has many wounds, but never a one on his back. Many nights he dreamed that he himself walked into Valhalla, and all the heroes stood up and shouted, "Welcome, Harald Halfdanson!" "Ah, the bite of the sword is sweeter than the kiss of your mother," he said to Olaf one day. "When shall I stand in the prow of a dragon and feast on the fight? I'm hungry to see the world. Ivar the far-goer tells me of the strange countries he has seen. Ah, we Vikings are a great folk. There's no water that has not licked our boat's sides. This cape of mine came in a Viking boat from France. These cloak pins came from a far country called Greece. In my father's house are golden cups from Rome, away on the southern sea. Every land pours rich things into our treasure chest. Ivar has been to a strange country where it is all sand and is very hot. The people call their country Arabia. They have never heard of Thor or Odin. Ivar brought beautiful striped cloth from there and wonderful, sweet-smelling waters. Oh, when shall the white horses of the sea lead me out to strange lands and glorious battles?" But Harald did something besides listen to stories. Every morning he was up at sunrise and went with a thrall to feed the hunting dogs. Thorstein taught him to swim in the rough waters of the fjord. Often he went with the men a-hunting in the woods and learned to ride a horse and pull a bow and throw a lance. Ivar taught him to play the harp and make up songs. He went much to the smithy, where the warriors mended their helmets and made their spears and swords of iron and bronze. At first he only watched the men or worked the bellows, but soon he could handle the tongs and hold the red-hot iron, and after a time he learned to use the hammer and to shape metal. One day he made himself a spearhead. It was 2 feet long and sharp on both edges. While the iron was hot, he beat into it some runes. When the men in the smithy saw the runes, they opened their eyes wide and looked at the boy, for few Norsemen could read. "What does it say?" they asked. "It says the name of my spear point, and it says Foesfear," Harald said. "But now for a handle." It was winter, and the snow was very deep, so Harald put on his skis and started for a wood that was back from the shore. Down the mountains he went 20-30 feet at a slide, leaping over chasms 100 feet across. In his scarlet cloak he looked like a flash of fire. The wind shot past him howling. His eyes danced at the fun. "It's like flying," he thought, and laughed. "I'm an eagle, now I soar," as he leaped over a frozen river. He saw a slender ash growing on top of a high rock. "That is the handle for Foesfear," he said. The rock stood up like a ragged tower, but he did not stop because of the steep climb. He threw off his skis and thrust his hands and feet into holes of the rock and drew himself up. He tore his jacket and cut his leather leggings and scratched his face and bruised his hands, but at last he was on the top. Soon he had chopped down the tree and cut a straight pole 10 feet long and as big around as his arm. He went down, sliding and jumping and tearing himself on the sharp stones. With a last leap, he landed near his skis. As he did so, a lean wolf jumped and snapped at him, snarling. Harald shouted and swung his pole. The wolf dodged, but quickly jumped again and caught the boy's arm between his sharp teeth. Harald thought of the spear point in his belt. In a wink, he had it out and was striking with it. He drove it into the wolf's neck and threw him back on the snow, dead. "You are the first to feel the tooth of Foesfear," he said, "but I think you will not be the last." Then, without thinking of his torn arm, he put on his skis and went leaping home. He went straight to the smithy, and smoothed his pole and drove it into the haft of the spear point. He hammered out a gold band and put it around the joining place. He made nails with beautiful heads and drove them into the pole in different places. "If it is heavy, it will strike hard," he said. Then he weighed the spear in his hand and found the balancing point, and put another gold band there to mark it. Thorstein came in while he was working. "A good spear," he said. Then he saw the torn sleeve and the red wound beneath. "Hello," he cried. "Your first wound." "Oh, it is only a wolf scratch," Harald answered. "By Thor," cried Thorstein, "I see that you are ready for better wounds. You bear this like a warrior." "I think it will not be my last," Harald said. And that is Foesfear, a story about the creation of Harald's spear point, but also a bit of a look into Harald and how he handles himself when put against a wall. This is Dan Scholes from the Folktale Project. Don't forget that you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, Overcast, anywhere you like to get your podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter at Folktale Project. You can find us on Auto Radio, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, anywhere you'd like to get your podcasts. And you can always head over to folktaleproject.com, where you'll find a new story waiting for you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. As always, thank you so much for listening.